What's the difference between an executor and a trustee? Let's find out. But first, the legal disclaimers. This is for informational purposes only. It's not legal advice, and it does not create an attorney-client relationship. So what is the difference between an executor and a trustee? When you're dealing with estate plans, you might hear these terms: executor, personal representative, trustee. Actually, the terms executor and personal representative mean the same thing. What you call it simply depends on where you live. Where I live, we call it a personal representative. So in this video, I'll say PR for short. So what's the difference between a PR and a trustee? I'll explain with an example. Assume this flowchart represents an estate plan, John Yossarian's estate plan. The boxes represent who owns an asset, and the arrows show how that asset is transferred. First, take a look at the will box. This represents everything in John's probate estate. Essentially, everything in John's name is in his probate estate, unless those assets are transferred through some non-probate methods. I'm not going to get into what's in or out of a probate estate because that's its own conversation. For now, let's assume everything is in John's probate estate. John's will says, upon my death, give everything I own to the revocable trust. This box represents the revocable trust. Let's say John created this trust agreement, but never retitled any assets in its name. So, during John's life, it doesn't actually own any assets. When John dies, there'll be two people primarily in charge of moving assets. What do I mean by moving assets? Well, John's dead, so he can't legally own anything anymore. But he also can't sign documents transferring ownership of those assets. Think about John's car. He can't own it anymore, but he also can't sign the title over to someone else. So there needs to be someone with the legal authority to transfer that title in a way that third parties, like the DMV and police, will recognize as valid. Now we can talk about the PR and the trustee. The PR's job is to move everything out of John's probate estate. The PR's actions are directed by the terms of John's will. So John's friend Dunbar, who's nominated as the PR in John's will, files John's will with the probate court and asks the court to bestow upon Dunbar the legal authority of the PR. Once this happens, Dunbar, as the PR, can legally transfer ownership of John's assets. In this case, the PR will transfer everything to the revocable trust. Once the PR has transferred all the assets out of the probate estate and ensured that all the right administrative tasks are done, like filings with the court and preparing tax returns, the PR's job is done, and Dunbar ceases to be PR. So what happens to the assets now? Well, whatever it says in the trust. And the person with the legal authority to manage the trust's assets is called the trustee. This trust says that Peter, Paul, and Mary are the beneficiaries, and the trust should pay for their medical, education, and other reasonable expenses, as the trustee decides is appropriate. So McWatt, as trustee, makes sure the trust assets are safe and invested in the right places. He makes sure the tax returns are filed, and he gives Peter, Paul, and Mary money from the trust for tuition and other expenses. This particular trust terminates when Mary, the youngest, turns 25. So when Mary turns 25, McWatt, as trustee, divides the trust assets into 3 equal shares and gives 1 share to each beneficiary. Now the trust is terminated, and McWatt ceases to be the trustee. In summary, both the PR and the trustee are caretakers of assets for the benefit of someone else. The actions of both are governed by an underlying document, a will or a trust. The difference is that the PR is a temporary role, limited to transferring assets out of the probate estate. The trustee's role is much more variable and depends on the terms of the trust agreement. A trustee might serve for as little as 1 year or the lifetime of a beneficiary. And the trustee might have no discretion to make decisions about who gets what, or the trustee might have a lot of discretion to decide when, how, and what beneficiaries benefit from the trust. With the trust, it all depends on the terms of the trust agreement. Thanks for watching.